Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Tim Winders. Welcome, Tim. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Great to talk to you today, Craig.
Yes, I second that and third that, and once more louder for those in the back. We started talking, and the two of us are like, we need to stop talking. We need to press the record button. So first of all, because podcasting is often a lot of hard work all by yourself, I just want to say mad props, congratulations on like 300 and more. Like I love when I see 300 and then 301 and 302. Like you didn't just rage quit at 300. So congratulations on that. That's not easy. And I also wanted to say there are a bunch of things in your show that almost feel like you getting into talking about podcasting. So if people are listening, if you want to nerd out, go listen to episode 300. Tim went to the trouble of like browbeating a chat GPT to talk to him. And we had a little discussion. It was not easy to get it to do what he wanted. And we could probably talk about that, but might be fun for people to go listen to that one. But what I wanted to start on today was, okay, your podcast is not just your passion project. It's connected to your coaching work. And I don't know if that's like its primary goal or if it started out as the thing and then coaching came out of it. But I'm really curious, like, okay, 300 is not easy. And you've been doing it for, did I remember correctly, like 2020 or 2019? So it's like at least 6 years, 5 years. Talk to me about how do you balance your energy levels and like make clearing the bar, like I get an episode every week. And for you, it's not just for fun. Like me, if I don't feel like it, I just don't, because the show is just for personal interest. So talk to me about how you manage your energy and how do you walk that line of, get over the bar versus, don't kill yourself with it.
I think that's a great point, Craig, because I'm a firm believer as a coach. I'll just mention this as a coach for leaders and executive teams, that if someone doesn't have some degree of passion or at least interest in something, they're not going to do it when it starts getting a little bit hard or monotonous or repetitive or whatever words we want to throw in there. And you're right. I mean, we're 6+ years, 300 episodes every Monday, plus some bonuses on Thursdays. We've had an episode that's gone out. And as you probably noticed, they're not necessarily short 15-minute snippets either. We're doing,
Not
60-minute mostly.
On mic. Yeah. I'm like mad props for, I'm going to say the one with chat was host on mic, but really not a lot of host on mic either. Hour plus conversations, which requires guest outreach and scheduling and post-production and editing and show notes.
Yeah. Here, and I've had to revisit this recently because like you said, and I think we want to be truthful and honest to anyone listening in here, it's a net negative as far as financial reward. And I maybe should qualify that because my podcast does sort of fit into the bigger picture of what I believe Tim is supposed to be doing on this earth. And that's really kind of the big thing to discuss here is what do I believe I'm supposed to be doing? And way back when I started, I was working with a client and they felt like they needed to do a podcast. It was during I want to say not the wild time of COVID when everybody thought they should podcast. It was before that when some people felt like they should and they thought they could. I had a client that never listened to podcasts, truthfully, but felt like he should have one, which there's a clue in that, just so you know. But I was a heavy duty consumer of podcasts and I love audio listening and gathering information. So I was trying to help him and I was sort of emceeing some and I was digging it and all that. And somebody said, "Hey, listen, you're pretty darn good at this." Sometimes we have to question a little bit more than that because we might need to ask, do they really know what they're talking about? But my personality was such, that's all I need to hear, And so And so this is kind of a rest of the story for people, but my wife and I live in an RV. So I'm coming to you, you're looking at me, but there are people listening in. Now, we're in a 39-foot motor coach, and I sat up in the passenger seat when I first started, got the microphone and everything. And I was looking out over the water in Coos Bay, Oregon. I mean, I was nothing but 20 feet from the
Mm,
water line, and I hit record and started recording. And I wanted to start doing the long form interviews that you probably have seen most of mine. But I have a pretty strong spiritual foundation. I'd spent some time in Bible school. I'm a follower of Jesus. And so, I felt like there was a bit of a spiritual calling for this, Craig. And so the Lord said, listen, I'm excited if you interview people and, whoever you want to interview. However, I need you in these first few episodes to tell some of your story. And if you go back to episode 1, I usually have a pretty strong, firm voice about me. I'm pretty confident sounding. There's a bit of shakiness because the episode 1 is titled Homeless and Bankrupt, which goes back to all that went on with my wife and I after 2008 and how we lived in a big house, had all these companies that were doing well. And by 2013, we were homeless and bankrupt. So
hmm.
had to tell those stories first. So this is kind of a long, winding road.
But it
You said
speaks
you
to the
like to take
title
the
of
long.
your show, which is something else we wanted to talk about. So the title of your show, which I now realized I didn't even say it. I'm sorry. The title of the show is Seek, Go, Create, which I think makes perfect sense when you hear that setup or that, the place that you were at when you pressed record. That
Yeah.
makes perfect sense to me now.
Well, it makes even more sense to know that in some of the toughest times of my life, when we were living in a mansion or whatever, some people might say it was a mansion, some people might not. And I was struggling with, who I was and all this type stuff. And financially, we were just getting beaten to a pulp, like a lot of other people were too, by the way, during those time frames. I would walk. We were in this golf course community, actually had 117 holes of golf. We had a lot of golf courses there.
Whew.
And I would go walk the golf courses on days when the certain courses weren't opened. And I would like to say it was prayer, Craig, but it was more probably like whining or complaining or griping or, you know, God, what's
Petulant
going on?
child.
Anger, whatever. I got those 3 words: seek, go, create, as somewhat instructions. There was a word on the end of it called now. So it was seek, go, create now. I dropped that when we came up with it. So later, so to jump back to 2019, after my client was going through all this stuff and all that, and I decided to hit record, I had my son, who's quite a talented young man, who was helping with some of the artwork and design and branding. I was saying, man, what should I call it? I don't want to call it the Tim Winder Show or anything like that. He goes, Dad, I've heard you talk about seek, go, create for the longest, for now, almost 10 years. He goes, why don't you go with that? And he worked up some of the artwork. And so that's what we started with. And so that's when I started back in 19. And to answer the original question, because I've had to ask myself, why would I keep going? Why would I keep doing what I do? And it is because I genuinely enjoy having long form conversations with people so that I could connect with them in ways in this highly digital and highly speedy,
Hmm. Disconnected
culture that
world.
we're in.
Yeah.
I will get someone like you mentioned, Mike Baer, who's an old friend of mine, or Jim Cook, who was one of the original 6 at Netflix, who was a recent interview, or others, a lot of authors, people like that, podcasters. I talk to a lot of podcasters. I'm able to talk to people for roughly 60 minutes without any interruption, and it nourishes my soul, and
I
I
agree.
love it.
It's precious. Yeah.
And so that's the real foundation. Now, what it also does, I want to give one more, just so that people don't think I'm some kind of oh man, he's such an idealist and he just loves talking to people. No, it also gives me 60 minutes of really good content to slice and dice and cut up and do a lot of cool stuff with on social media and YouTube and things like that, because part of the biggest thing we're getting consumed right now are short 30 to 60-second clips that I pull from those 60-minute interviews
Right.
and articles. And we got Medium articles that we have. I got articles that go on LinkedIn. So yeah, I love the conversations. That's what keeps me going. But then also we're able to use that in a lot of different
Hmm.
forms.
And when you say you're using that, I'm guessing you mean your that let's call that a media empire. Your media empire's job is to bring people. I only wanted to say it because it's to see a chuckle. That media empire's job is to bring people back to the coaching, or is to just to do the work of spreading the message, or why are you going to all that trouble if it's a giant net
Yeah,
negative? Well, maybe not giant. You just said
probably.
net negative.
Yeah. Probably the mega empire is real interesting. I used to have a team that did a lot of this for me, and now entirely everything that someone sees from Seek Go Create is done either right here with me and some tools, a lot of cool tools like AI and other things like that, and then my wife does the graphics. That's it. It used to we used to have quite the team doing it, but what it really does, I believe it satisfies my curiosity. I will insert some ads for my coaching on some of the long form. If you listen to a few, you probably heard me
Yep.
jump in for 30 seconds and say, "Hey, if you want to coach, to learn how to be more proactive." But I rarely get much from that.
Hmm.
I don't really need a lot of clients to do what I do. I'm not one of these folks that have 30 clients. I work with somebody and I work with them for 6, 7 years or longer. So that's not that critical. But I'm also in the process of writing some books, Craig. And I just feel like all of it kind of fits together because I enjoy it and want to get a message out, a bigger message out to the world. And, how well am I doing? I don't know. I'm comfortable with it. So that's
Yeah,
kind
it
of all
sounds
that
like you're
matters.
doing great. Sounds like the metric is, I don't know, honey, what are you thinking? Like, there's a great Kurt Vonnegut quote: "If this isn't nice, I don't know what is." And I'm often spotted with a cup of coffee, standing in I have a very small backyard, and I'll be like, I'm like, I don't know, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. There's just something to be said for, um, like having sane goals and then acknowledging, even if you don't reach the goals, but acknowledging, like, yeah, I put in a good effort, not just my best effort, but I put in a good effort. I feel like I accomplished something. I feel like both what you're doing and what I'm doing is making the world a better place. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm struck by, just my brain thinks of random things. Do you have the following? This freaks me out sometimes. I think about, if somebody wants to start listening to my show today, I feel like I really need to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, don't start at episode 1, but number, I don't know what number, like 42. I really think you should listen to 42 because I clearly have something figured out." Like, do you ever have that moment where you're thinking about, "Oh, I feel like I should do something, I want to say meta or a level up with your show, where like you collect together, here are the 10 episodes. If you're just getting on board with me, listen to these 10 after you listen to the latest ones." You ever, like, what do you think about that? Or do you just go, nope, I'm just leaving a road behind me of done work?
Hmm. You know, I just want to put out as quality of an episode as I can every week. and, and if someone is so intrigued they want to back up and look at stuff, or I mean, I've looked at it and I said, boy, if I took these 8 episodes, packaged them together, that would be awesome. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm even answering your question or if I understand it, but in answer to your question, I am very, I, I don't want to say I'm not concerned about the results. I'm more into the methodical effort of putting out what I do and how it fits in with all the other things that I might be working on, Craig,
Mm,
so that I don't really get hung up on some of the things I can't control, truthfully. I mean, you and I know we could do everything close to perfect for what we're trying to do, and downloads and, reach and all those kind of things. We may not be able to move the needle at all.
at all.
And if your mood goes up and down based on that, I would venture to say that you could be short-lived in this project. And maybe some people are to do it for a season and then move on to something else, you know.
Hmm.
Right now, what's interesting for us is that we are getting the most growth over on YouTube. And we are not necessarily video first. I am audio first, but I capture video and I try to make it look as good as possible, but it's not like I've got things coming in and then I stop for a little while and I dance, and then I've got all these
Yeah,
graphic
it's
stuff
just two
coming in.
talking heads, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I know we're having a conversation here, Craig, but listen, for YouTube, I need to dance for about 30 seconds, and it'd be nice if you did too. So
Oh,
why
I
don't
got
we
bad
do
news.
that?
I don't dance. Oh man, you don't want to see me
But
dance.
anyway, and so, but I mean, over on YouTube, it's just like split screen or back and forth. One great tool is Descript right now because it actually will automatically do a lot of that
Hmm.
video edit for you. It'll take a conversation you're having. If you're talking, it'll go to you. If I'm talking, it'll go to me. And then at times it'll split screen and then it'll back and forth and it'll have me
Gives you some
nodding while you're
visual
doing.
interest. Yeah.
Yeah. To make it a little better than just two people sitting there talking for 60 minutes. But the clips and other things like that, they're doing really well over on YouTube. And I'm just very pleased at our growth over there. And so I just want to get a message out to as many people as possible. And I feel like we're doing that pretty well.
Hmm. What's something that surprised you about all of it? So it's really clear. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Really clear that you didn't set out with a plan. You didn't have a grand vision when you pressed record at the beginning. So what's the thing that surprised you the most? Out of all these episodes, is it an individual story or is it some big takeaway? Or
I, well, at times I could be considered delusional. So I'll confess something here.
I
I,
think we were
I, I,
separated at birth. What?
I probably thought that I would end up being huge, like massive something. And so it's been sort of surprising to me that we haven't had a, a bigger,
Hmm.
well, I don't know, following or whatever, but not entirely because it's helped me kind of come to terms. I'm 61 years old. I'm not a young fella anymore. I feel good other than the last few days. I told you I've had a little bit of a crud here that I'm dealing with. Um, I, I I actually am coming to terms with my audience. The people that I interact with might even be a better way of saying that is not the masses. It's a mature, more critical thinking, deeper thought type audience. And I don't think that those numbers are necessarily huge unless someone already has like some kind of celebrity type following.
Hmm.
And I don't. If there was anything that would be the opposite of a celebrity following, it would be me. And so those things it was surprising to me, but it's also kind of helped me come to terms with kind of who I write for, who I interact with. I'm sort of a coach. I'm a leader of leaders. I kind of I'm not one of these that just coaches everybody who wants to get a coach. I actually coach CEOs and executive level teams, which is not the masses either. So I
Hmm.
think it's helped me identify my audience, even though it might have been surprising to me that not everybody just wants to listen to what Tim has to say.
Definitely an element of self healing, an element of clarity, self clarification. I'm
Awareness,
hearing self
awareness.
awareness. Yeah. Uh, I wonder how much of I'm a process person, so like I'll even since I have checklists that tell me when to message Tim and to make sure that I do the things. And on one hand, it really saves me because I have another episode that I've already recorded, and like I don't get lost, juggling the thoughts of the two. I can switch context better, but I can also spend a lot of time rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I can just be like, well, let's polish everything. It's like, yo, Craig, zoom out. Like, is there any point to all these processes that I can invent? So I'm just wondering, what are the ways that you look at the kind of like repetitive work? Is it all just second nature, which I'm guessing not quite, but is it second nature, or are you using processes to keep things under control? Or, at some point, does your wife go, shut up about the podcast? Like, like, how do you manage the actual workload, nuts and bolts?
Well, I think I have to qualify this answer with I am an industrial and systems engineer from Georgia Tech. And so process, structure, and systems are very high on my list. And I also have to say that my wife would be considered a scrum master, project manager
Mm,
type person. So right now, I can't share my screen, but I've got a Notion window that's up on my screen here that has my SGC episode list, and it has the 12 episodes that are currently in the hopper that are listed out. And underneath each episode, we've got probably 12 buckets of strategic items that are repetitive items for each episode. One being pre items, getting it scheduled, one being pre prep for me to get ready to record, one being to record, one being
right.
post edit, one being the graphics, one being and each one of those has 30 to 50 items listed under each one of those. They're repetitive type items. And so we track all of that stuff and keep up with it. And now both of us, if one were to do like strength finders, which is one of the skill type things, both my wife and I are high strategic. So the strategic piece of it is kind of easy for
Hmm.
us. And so really all I do is I just go to this list, this model. And one of the things that people would be saying is that, oh, I want that list. It's kind of our list. My wife and I have discussed what it would look like to package it together. I mean, I'm afraid it would intimidate most people and have most people quit
And it's
podcasting if
not
they saw it.
meaningful. I've tried to share some of my stuff. It's like, no, the list
Yeah,
is
it's
meaningful
personal.
because for you it was blank. And then the first time you make a mistake or the first time you do the brainstorming session, you put some things on it. And every one of those things has meaning, deep learning
Yeah.
behind it. Um,
Yeah. So
I had
anyway,
a
so
question. I was
that
going
answers your question. It is much, we
okay,
are
so what's the
very,
weakness? If strategic is the strength, what's the weakness in the whole thing?
the weakness could be that it boxes in some creativity. I don't think that that's the case because what we attempt to do is create the strategy which allows the creativity to flourish. It that way I'm not sitting here when I'm, later this week I'll do 2 episodes and I'm not, both of them, the introductions are written, both of them, they've been scheduled for, probably months. I know we usually schedule about, 30, 60, sometimes 90 days out. And, I'll pop in, I've read the books for the people that I'm interviewing and listen to some podcasts. So I'm prepped and everything. And then I could just be extremely present
Hmm.
when I have the conversation. I don't have to think about a lot of the other stuff, which my mind could go down thinking about, oh man, did I push record? I've only done that once, not pushed record, which is, if anyone hasn't done that, I'm not sure they're a real podcaster.
I don't think I have ever forgotten and not noticed pretty quickly. I started recording in person in the field, and it's easier because you have a
Mm,
physical recorder and it's got a number that
gosh.
runs and a red light. But I will say I once interviewed someone who I have subsequently got a podcast with, but I had a friend in movement communities who I had been seeing at events at different places in the world, like on different continents for like 5 years.
Mm,
And every time I saw him, he was like the photographer at the event, or we weren't in the same group. And I kept saying, Andy, Andy, Andy. And then after 5 years of working on it, I was in a rented flat in London where I had the purpose of going to do conversations. And he showed up and I was working by myself that day. I used to have a production assistant and he and I pressed record and it was all cool. We had this great conversation and I had the night before misformatted the SD card. I had 3 minutes and 30 seconds of like the bullshit before we actually start and a whole conversation. And yes, that face that Tim is making currently, that was me at the end when I went, oh, Andy, I'm so sorry. and we both agreed. So there's a takeaway from this. We both agreed we still had an awesome conversation because it was the longest he and I had been like in a room uninterrupted. So all the way back to your point about, Tim saying, I just really like the conversations. I felt like I was okay. I'm like, I'm a win on the floor and I'm okay with that. So I think
I,
there's deep wisdom there for anybody who's, on like episode 7, Yeah, you're gonna have stuff go wrong.
I
They're gonna
know.
degauss your
Yeah,
computer at TSA.
I've
you
just
know?
gotten I've just gotten to where I don't really get hung up on that stuff, and I can't say that I've always been this way. It's like, "Oh, man, that quality wasn't that great. This" I mean, I think with the tools most of us have now that I don't wanna say it's hard to not have good quality, but, it's like, it's pretty darn easy to get a decent, $100
Yeah.
mic or less even, and, run it through something on your computer and capture it, and, even I did Zoom for my first 100 and I don't know, 50. That was okay. That
Yeah.
was
It
fine.
clears the bar. Yes, it
It
wouldn't have
clears the
existed if you didn't
bar, and
have it.
you're doing stuff. I had to go back and listen to a few episodes recently because I was re-interviewing people, and I went, that wasn't the greatest, but man, it was 2019. It was 2020,
Yeah.
come on. And so I don't get that bent out of shape. I want to do the best we can. I want to, be as excellent, but then when it comes time to do it, it's just like, let's just do the best we can and just move on and just go get this one done and then go do the next one.
Hmm. You mentioned books. I know I believe you have one book already, and I want to ask, like, the book is a fiction novel. And I'm like, wait, tell me more about why Tim wrote a fiction novel. Maybe, but I actually think I didn't have a chance to read it, but I actually think it ties in. But tell me, roughly, when did you write the book? Is that before or after starting the podcast? And why that story? Why did you tell that story?
So that probably was a slight catalyst for doing the podcast too, because my thought was, if I've got a podcast with, a million people listening in and I say, oh, by the way, I have a book,
Mm,
200,000 of them would buy the book. Another, going back to what you asked earlier about what surprised me, it's like, we don't have a million listeners. Um, I, I, I've been on quite the journey from '08 to today. And what's interesting is that I thought I had everything figured out in '08. Um, that's where, cue the laughs, cue the chuckles, cue the
what
whatever
is that? Yeah.
sounds you got that you
Show
could,
God your
put on
plan, right?
bunch.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. It's like, hey God, I've got it all figured out. I'm so excited that you're,
Thank you so much.
blessing me and helping me. But so it's been quite the journey, and it did include being homeless. I mean, when my wife and I left that big house, we lost that house and stuff like that. We traveled for a while in a Honda van, and we were in New Zealand. We were on the middle of the North Island, Tongariro National Park, and I went to sleep that night after reading some scriptures, some things in the Bible, and I got the idea for a story, the beginning, the ending, and a lot of the chapters along the way, based on some inspiration from some things I was reading. And so I said, maybe I'm supposed to write a novel, which, maybe we should ask more questions. But so over the next 5 years, I wrote a novel, which isn't really like you said, a good fit for someone who's now a leadership coach, business guy, stuff like that. Maybe I should have written, the 7 steps to being the best dang leader you could ever be, or something like that, which, you know, those have been done before. But it was kind of a journey type novel, and it had elements of my journey in it, but it was really written, I believe, to men of a certain age, maybe like you and I, that we've gotten to a place where we just say, you know what, is this what it's all about? Maybe there's more. And so it was a novel that's related to that, and kind of the underlying theme. And I used to have this as the theme for the podcast. It's the subtitle for the book. The title of the book is Coach: A Story of Success Redefined, which is not super sexy, by the way. But really, I actually used to have Seek Go Create Success Redefined as the subtitle, because really that's what my journey has been over the last, almost 20 years now, is redefining what I thought success really meant.
Mm,
And so if there was like a foundation to kind of all that I've been doing, it's really what I do when I go in and coach too, because I've been through things, Craig, to where I kind of, I don't think I'm trying to impress or, you know, do different things. I'm trying to get to some root type things. So I'll ask questions very few people will ask. And also, I don't really care what people say to me. I don't really care what they think about me. I don't really care. I mean, listen, I'm not going to try to be a jerk or anything like that, but I feel like we need to get to what are we here for? You know, what's our purpose? Even if it's just like, what's our purpose right here with this call? You know, what's our purpose
Yeah.
here in this time we're talking or with this company or with this ministry or whatever? And so I dig, and that's kind of those three foundational principles. It's kind of it's fiction with a purpose is the way I define the novel. Oddly enough, I've just finished up an addendum to that novel that's like a 5 years later story that
Hmm.
that I'm about to probably be getting over to someone to edit and get that out. And then I'm planning some really big writing projects that are in the not too distant future that I'm not sure how it's going to fit into all that I'm doing, but I'm pretty darn excited about that. So it's interesting with fiction, you can just make stuff up. I mean, it's not like you got to be right.
I'm hearing a lot of powered by connection. Maybe I think and what I want to ask is so in your conversation with it's Bear Mike Bear doesn't have an S on the end. Your conversation, you know, dates and times in podcast universe, right? So the episode was released yesterday, but I don't know when I'm publishing this. So good luck, people. I think it was like the 17th of March. Your conversation with Mike, like in the middle, you guys got really into talking about control, the illusion of control. So when you were just talking about, being in New Zealand and thinking, well, maybe I'm supposed to tell a story. Maybe I'm supposed to write this book. I feel like that's all the things I've heard you say so far today. That sounds like the first glimpse of maybe I should just give up on this control thing. But maybe that was when you threw the keys for your house in the mailbox and drove away. I don't know. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the journey about? I don't want to even say relinquishing control, right? Because you and Mike pointed right at it. You're not relinquishing anything. You don't have any control. But that idea of letting go of the urge to strive for control, that's definitely something we have to let go of. So what are your thoughts on like how does
Yeah.
that journey of control fit in there with podcasting
What's
and books?
fascinating is the conversation that we were having were two high control guys. You may have noticed that. He and I worked together back in the late 90s doing some consulting and coaching, and he was sort of mentoring, but we worked together. It was I really love Mike Bear. He's great to talk to. But he was about, I think, if I recall the conversation correctly, it was probably been a month or two back since I heard it, but he was about to be 70 years old, and we were just kind of
Yes.
waxing poetic about
Yes.
where are we in life and what's going on. And he was talking about giving up control and
Yeah, and his
or
grandkids going to
realizing that,
college, right?
yeah, and realizing that we really don't have that much control. I think we fool ourselves, and I think that's what leads to our stress and anxiety and you know what's interesting, Craig? If you and I were out having to hunt down our food every day, I don't think we'd even be having. Well, first of all, we wouldn't be on a podcast. You know, this is like first world
Right.
issues, right? so, so there is that. There is that whole issue. We wouldn't be going, yeah, man, what's my purpose in life? So, you know what? I want to eat this week.
Shut up and kill the
If we don't
bison.
kill something,
Stop
could
talking,
you
right?
get your act together and take the dang headphones off and let's go shoot something, or you know, whatever. But I do think that one of the things that some of us do is we attempt to control our environment, the people around us. My wife and I were just discussing this morning, we were having coffee, at the age that we're at, how little that we really have control over. I mean, we've got grown kids, we've got grandkids, we've got all these projects we're working on. I can control whether or not I reach out to someone and we have a conversation, and then I can control if we get it edited and get it out. I can't control who listens. I can't control, you know, if something goes quote unquote viral or any of that kind of stuff. And people that say that they can, I just kind of look at them and go, really? You really think
Mm.
so? I don't
Check
think
back
so.
on you in a few years.
Yeah, let's see how long term that plays out. And, you know, we could probably come up with names right now of people that were, um, you know, like whatever happened to that guy that, you know, he bit my finger, one of the first YouTube videos that ever went viral. Like, where's
Yeah.
that kid now?
Yeah.
Chucky, he bit my finger, and it was like 20 plus years ago that the first YouTube videos were loaded up. So I think coming to terms with that, and that we control what we control, our attitude, our mindset, what we consume, what we allow into our ears and our eyes and, our soul, I guess. Those are the things we can control. Everything else, as much as I would like to say I jump in at times and try to do it, can't, can't do it. And so I think a lot of the journey that I've been on with the podcast, with the novel, even with the coaching that I'm doing, which really the coaching is what brings in the financial resources that, most people know it's not a book. It's probably not a podcast. It would be coaching. That's what brings in, even with that, it's just a matter of things I can't control. I actually work with people. This is interesting for people to hear. I work with people, Craig, that I don't actually do any work at all as a coach. None. I talk to them. I ask questions. I help. I might make recommendations. I listen. I facilitate. I try to pull out the greatness that's already there within them or the leadership team. I do not actually do any of the work. And I think that's good for me currently.
I think that's the right attitude. That's the good coach. The good coach is the person who that's terrific. All right, what goals are you setting for next week? And my job is to write that shit down and to call you on it next week. I get it, but
Mhm.
um yeah, Tim, I can't think of anything else to talk about. Uh, what's what's something that's been top of mind for you? Like, how are you going to stop? Like, are they just going to prise the microphone out of your cold dead hands, or like, can you imagine ever? Like,
Hmm.
there was a time when podcasting wasn't the thing that you were really drawn to, and
Yeah.
like, what happens when you find the next thing, or like, have you spotted something, or how are you going to imagine doing this forever until you have no clue what you're doing and they're just pushing the mic in front of you?
Interesting. Well, you're asking the questions that oddly enough, being a strategic guy, I probably have never thought of. The way I would do it within a business setting is what's your exit? How are you going to exit out
Hmm.
of this? Are you going to bundle it up and sell it? Nah, I don't think most of this stuff is sellable. Uh, you know, uh, I think it would be when I stop wanting to get on calls like this and have conversations. That would be when I say, you know what? Let's just leave all of this out there. Um, I think I told you I'm doing some more writing right now, and I'm researching, and a lot of it has some biblical foundation to it. It's actually not necessarily biblical in the storytelling, but it has a biblical foundation. I told my wife just this morning, I said, man, I am really excited. I could be doing this research 24/7.
Hmm.
I'm enjoying doing that, but it actually still kind of spills over into what I'm doing with the podcast, because I could actually see myself taking parts of that, and with research I'm doing, interview people that have pieces that might fit into what I'm researching. So, I'm 61 years old. My voice is raspy today. I guess there's probably a time that I would say, I need to probably be done with this. I can't really envision that right now. But I say that, but then tomorrow, if I wake up and go, you know what, I'm done. I'm kind
Yeah.
of cool with that too. I'm comfortable with whatever it looks like. And I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah. What I wanted, like, well, I should just say, well, seek, go, create, and like let you let you go. But I also wanted to ask about some more nuts and boltsy things because I'm like, oh, let's go a little further. We also mentioned before we hit record, we were talking about the actual title of your show,
Hmm.
and I know that I don't want to like tee it up like I'm omniscient, but I know that you've been thinking about maybe changing the name sometimes, and you've already mentioned you've changed the subtitle, and I don't know. I'm going to push back and say I think Seek Go Create is I'm in love with threes. Like anytime people come at me with three of something, I have a whole show where I ask people for three words to describe their practice, and threes are awesome.
Hmm.
Um, but what is it about, what is it that's pulling you to not this name? You see what I'm asking? Like, what's the
I,
draw to change it?
I think the simple answer is, as far as a discovery title, people may not know exactly what it is when they're scrolling or looking at it. I'm not exactly sure how much quote unquote discovery is going on in podcast land right now anyway. So I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it. And I do love our branding. I love our everything about our brand. I love when I go to all of our platforms and socials and stuff, I go, you know what? I'm not boastful or prideful, but man, I feel pretty good about what we've got out here. Our website is a
Hmm.
nice look and feel. Our,
Yeah, thank you
like
for
I was
building on
telling you
the
earlier.
open web.
Yeah, 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 that thing. And then going to Apple and seeing just the scroll of the way it looks and all. I like it. So the only thing I've adjusted in the last maybe year ish is I added this subtitle, which is the leadership journey, which I'm still not sure that it means much, but it adds the word leadership in there. It adds journey. And also I did the thing that a lot of people say you're not supposed to do is I packed a few other keywords into a longer title that a lot of people will see, for Christian business people, entrepreneurs, leaders,
Hmm.
blah, 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 some words that I will tell you, I haven't noticed. I've noticed
Any
a little
difference?
bit of traction with that, but I haven't noticed much from that. And so I'm probably in all likelihood not going to make a change, but it's always something in the back of my mind. I'm wondering, is there a name that might be better? I just haven't come up with anything that I like better.
Hmm. Which I think is a perfectly valid reason to just stick with it forever. I like the name. Also, the fact that you have the domain name that goes with the name is like, oh yes, you have to have something that makes sense. I also think it's somewhere I wrote a little thing about. I actually think the way people find podcasts, the way people find one's own podcast, is they find a specific episode. So somebody types somebody's name. They don't even know I exist. They don't know my shows. As they type in, Tim Winders, and all of a sudden up comes this thing called Pod Talk. People don't care. They don't care what color my logo is. They don't care who I am. They want like they either know who Tim is or they saw Tim wrote a book or something, and they hit play, and then they're thinking, "Shut up, Craig! Like like who is this Craig dude? Get the Tim." And the show is for that, right? I'm supposed to be making a thing for the listener, and they listen to Tim, and they probably just go away, but
Right.
maybe somebody goes, "Huh, this Craig guy, I kind of like his question." So then they maybe scroll for another one. So I actually think the names of our shows don't really mean diddly.
I don't think we want to repel people. I'll give you a
Yes,
quick
okay.
example. I know we need to jump off here. Back prior to the election, we're recording this in 2025. Prior to our election, Donald Trump decided to get on some long form interviews, which I'm pleased when candidates do that. And I said, okay, if I go listen to Donald Trump, I need to go listen to Kamala Harris. Where can I find her? Well, I only found her on one, and the title of the podcast was "Call Me Daddy" or "Call Her Daddy,"
I think I
which
remember
is
hearing
not
about that. Yeah,
yeah, which
like
is not
what?
exactly a name that's appealing to a 60-year-old dude. And I even told my wife, I said, sweetheart, if you happen to look at my podcast player, I've got
This is not what
Call
it
Her
looks like.
Daddy. Call Her Daddy is on here, and I'm going to listen because I believe that I want to listen to both long form, and I enjoyed listening to both. There was some topics that were discussed that I didn't enjoy as much because I'm not a female and I'm not part of that audience. Um, but I will say this, even though I would have been repelled from that, it attracts the audience she wants, and she's got a big, big, big audience.
Hmm.
So, I guess anyway, it is what it is, and something we can or can't control. I can control, like you said, seekgocreate.com. I've got that. I've got
Yeah.
every social media platform for Seek Go Create, and there is something to be said about that. It's like SGC underscore 43, blah, blah, blah. Go find me there, Tim.
Yeah.
No, just Seek Go Create.
Yeah, non-confusing is important. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Tim. As much as I always hate to say it, I think that's a good place to stop. I think it was terrific. I don't hate to say that. That's awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know we had a scheduling miss. I apologize for bailing on you for a year, but I'm back. So thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Very good. I enjoyed the conversation, Craig.